Hello and welcome. Welcome into the Witch Wound Masterclass. I'm so delighted that you're here today with me. We'll be spending the next approximately 90 minutes together discussing this wound, discussing the witch wound and what it is, how it shows up in your life, how it impacts you, how it impacts all of us, really, and some steps that you can take to begin to heal it. Before I jump into introducing myself as your guide and a little bit about what we'll be covering today, I first want to acknowledge the bravery that it took for you to decide to be here today. It might not feel like a brave thing to do to sign up for a masterclass, to carve out the time to attend, whether that be live or catching the replay, but I am here to tell you that it is. It's brave because this class is about something with the word witch in it. And despite the current trend of witchiness being cool and accepted, and we're seeing more witchy shops pop up and witch talk is a huge thing. And you're not likely to literally get called out or burned at the stake today if you talk about or call yourself a witch. It's still a very triggering word for many people. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the history behind it and all of that today as well, of course. And it's also a brave thing to be here. Again, whether you're here with me live, whether you're watching the replay, whether you're listening to this on the podcast, because it means that you've chosen to take the time out of your day to tend to yourself. And that, especially as women in this culture, is a radical act. It's a brave act to say, actually, I'm going to take 90 minutes for me. I'm not serving other people in this moment. I'm not being quote unquote productive or useful to others. I'm tending to me. And so acknowledging that bravery in yourself and thanking yourself for taking the time to be here for you. I always like to take a moment at the beginning of these classes, of any kind of workshop or talk that I'm giving, to encourage you, if you are watching this on the replay, or perhaps if you're listening to this on the podcast, because I will be posting this to the podcast in 2 parts, I encourage you to listen on regular 1x speed. And for some of you, that may not even cross your mind. Like, of course, I always watch things on 1 time speed. And for some of you, that might be like, oh, I feel a bit called out. And I know myself, I watch things typically. If I'm watching a replay, I'm like, I'm going to get this in more efficiently. And so it ends up being on 1.5 or sometimes even 2 times speed. And if that's the only way you can fit this in today, then of course, go ahead and do that. Definitely, you're going to want to slow it down to regular speed when we drop into our guided embodiment visualization practice towards the end. But for this first part, the part where it's me talking and explaining and sharing the knowledge with you, if you have to listen to it sped up to get it into your day, do so. However, I would challenge you to create the time to be with this at the speed that it was originally recorded, because your nervous system deserves to breathe and to take this information in at the speed with which life moves. So, just a little challenge there. This space today is a safe space, right? There's no judgment here. There is a welcoming of all bodies, of all questions, of all beliefs. It is also a brave space. And so I'm here for your questions, anything that might feel confronting or that you need to voice. I'm here for that, as long as it's presented or questioned in a respectful manner. I always like to remind people as well that in this space, in any space that I'm leading, I am a guide. I'm not a guru. So take what resonates, take what feels true for you, what lands in your body, and leave the rest. I am not an expert on you, only you are that. There is no right way to experience the work today. You might really just experience it intellectually. Some of it might land really deeply. Permission to pause if you're watching the recording, permission to step away if you need a break and you're here with me live. Okay, a little bit about me before we drop in. So my name is Eileen, and I am a spiritual and intuitive coach, an energy healer, and a slow living witch, among many other titles. I wasn't always in this line of work. Before embarking into the coaching and healing world, I was a midwife. So I guess in that sense, I've always been a healer and a witch, as midwives were the original witches. But I want to share a little bit about how, I really recognize as I was preparing for this workshop specifically how many ways the witch wound had impacted me in my life and how I had to overcome that wound to get to where I am today. And I say overcome because I am healing it, but the healing journey, it's not linear and it's never complete. And there are layers upon layers. And so when you walk away from today, you're going to have some really beautiful awareness. You're going to have some really beautiful tools to start that healing process, but you're not going to walk away healed. If I were promising that, I would be lying. So in my own story, I really have recognized how the witch wound, that fear of speaking up, of shining my light, of standing firm in my power or my desires has impacted me. It kept me stuck in a marriage where I couldn't voice my own desires or needs. I felt like I wasn't allowed to. It kept me there for a long time. It kept me in my role as a midwife beyond burnout. I loved the job, but I was self-sacrificing, constantly sacrificing sleep and hydration and nourishment, all of those physical needs. And I eventually had to decide that the fear of failure, both in that marriage that I reference and in my career, that fear of failure wasn't as big as the absolute need in my body to find a different way, a different path. And as always happens, when we open ourselves to the possibility of more or of different, a different way found me. And it found me through the Center for Applied Neuroscience, where I got my coaching certification, and through the wild medicine energy healers training that was offered by another former midwife here in Calgary, where I live. And those two paths collided. They coalesced in my life, initially as ways for me to cope and heal and grow. And it became very apparent to me very quickly that this was another way of moving in the world and offering my gifts and my magic that didn't require me to be on call. And so here I am, speaking to you, remembering very clearly what it felt like to still be stuck in that place of subverting my own needs to those of everyone around me. So, before we begin talking about the switch wound, what it is, how it's showing up in your life, I first want to just have us land here together. So if you are sitting in a chair, making sure your feet are flat on the floor, feeling into your seat bones. Maybe you place a hand on your heart. Maybe you place a hand on your belly. Maybe you close your eyes if that feels comfortable to do so, or simply have a soft gaze. Breathing in and breathing out, and feeling yourself connected to your breath, to your body, to this moment. And I would love for you to gently pose the question to yourself: what brought you here today? What made you sign up? Why are you here? And can you hold that why in your heart as your intention to guide what it is that you get out of this 90 minutes together today? All right, so let's get into it. I have a tendency to wax poetic, so I'm going to try to keep this to time. But let's start with, what is the witch wound? Some of you might be very familiar with this wound already. Some of you might have heard it thrown around. Some of you might never have heard this term. And so all of those experience levels are welcome here. Never fear. If you don't know anything about it, you're going to leave knowing a lot about it. If you already have a sense of what it is, I'm pretty certain you're going to have a deeper understanding after we wrap together today. So the way that I like to start describing the witch wound is through a series of questions. Have you ever held back from speaking what was on your heart or on your mind? Have you ever softened your edges to make other people more comfortable? Have you ever felt a quiet whisper in your body, in your mind, that says, if I speak my truth, I'll be cast out. If I stand in my power, I won't be safe. That is the witch wound. That is a real tangible way for me to define what the witch wound is in our lived experience. More practically, it's an inherited ancestral trauma that is carried in the body, that is passed down through epigenetics and our DNA. I heard the math once again recently that if we look back 7 generations, we have 126 grandmothers in our lineage, just 7 generations back. And 7 generations back brings us to around the end of the burning times, which we're going to talk about here soon. But we have evidence from epigenetics, this mutability of DNA in response to lived experience, whether that be plenty or whether that be scarcity, whether that be joy and abundance, whether that be trauma. And so we know that ancestral traumas are inherited. They get passed down. They're codified in our DNA. When I first embarked on this journey into spirituality and the world of energy and learning about all of this stuff that for me was very kind of out there. I use the term woo. My podcast is called the Woo Curious Podcast for a reason. I was using this phrasing of my bones remember. I felt it when I landed in Ireland for the first time when I visited there. I felt it when I thought about this wound that's been passed down, and then to learn that epigenetics exists and is verifying what I felt to be true was so validating. So I am very much now in acceptance of there being energetic realities and things that we can't or haven't been able to explain by science, and that doesn't make them any less valid or real or true. And I was socialized in this culture, and we're going to talk a lot about what that means as we go through today. But I love having some science to back me up also, because it's helpful when we're speaking to people who aren't open to the energetic realms, the spiritual realms. It can be so helpful to give ourselves authority when we do have some science to back us up. So anyways, inherited ancestral trauma carried in the body. The witch wound is fear, and it's fear that runs through society. It courses through society. It's a fear of feminine power, of intuition, of visibility, of voice. And something that's so important to know is that it's not about you. So often when we're struggling with things, I'll use the fear of visibility, when we're afraid to get in front of a camera and speak. Perhaps you have a business and you're supposed to be, big quotations there, speaking in your stories and talking to the camera. And maybe that feels really, really scary for you and hard for you to do. That is, yes, a product of your lived experience, but our lived experience is so molded and affected by the culture that we are in. And the culture that we are in has inherited this wound. So it didn't start with you. It exists within you. It affects you, but it's not your fault. And it's not just like this personal failing to overcome or this thing that you have to get over or push past, right? Another important thing to note too is that even if you don't identify with the word witch, which many of you may not and may never, you do not ever need to take that identity on, the wound is still shaping how you move through the world, especially if you're here in a female body. So where does the wound come from? Why does it exist? Or how did we end up with this, right? So for centuries, we're going to go back to the 1500s, mid 1600s. So this is the time that has been named the Burning Times. And it's a period in Europe, in the European witch trials. It peaked between the 1500s and 1600s. It started before then, went on beyond then. But it was during this time that tens of thousands, estimates range wildly, anywhere from 40,000 to 100,000 women, primarily, about 85% of the people were women who were executed, often by burning, because of the climate of religious, social, and political turmoil. So for centuries, women who held power, the healers, the midwives, the knowledge keepers, the wise women, they were systematically targeted and silenced and punishment. It was a way of consolidating control. It was a terror campaign by the Holy Roman Empire, right? We have the Holy Inquisition, this key piece of the powers that be trying to take power from the collective. So our history is one of moving from collectivism into feudalism and now into capitalism. And this burning time, the witch trials, this Holy Inquisition was a really key part of that shift of control. Because prior to feudalism, the control of the lands were held in commons. They were stewarded and worked by the common people. And when the empire wanted to take control of that to be able to exact taxes, turn common folk into basically serfs on the land that they'd always lived on, they needed to disrupt the power centers, the stability of the collective, of the communities. And to do so, it was most effective to subjugate and sow fear around women, because women were key. Because women held the means of subsistence, of the production of food. They transmitted intergenerational knowledge. They were the healers. They had the knowledge of the herbs. They had the knowledge of the community. When there was interpersonal conflict, it was typically the women who people came to for resolution. And in order to take that power, that center of community away and destabilize, the word witch was invented. The notion of witchcraft was invented in the 15th century, so the 1400s. It was like this negative rebrand of ancient practices that, again, allowed a protection of the rich, or allowed to take power away from the commons, from the people. It spread fear, it spread distrust. So all of a sudden you've got neighbors ratting out neighbors so that they don't get ratted out. And it really created this turmoil and this divisiveness. We're seeing this again so vividly in our politics these days, is this division between people, this fear mongering, this pitting people against each other and dehumanizing the other. And the message throughout this time was so clear and very much directed at women, that your intuition is not to be trusted, that your body's knowing is dangerous, that your voice is too much. And it was never about keeping communities safe. It was about consolidating power in the hands of the few. And it was a very real, traumatic, lived experience for centuries. Can you imagine the impact? When we think about DNA, impact of trauma and epigenetics of it, multiple generations of women lived in this place of fear, of being told that their intuition couldn't be trusted, that their voice wasn't important and in fact had to be silenced, that the wisdom that had been passed down for generations was dangerous and harmful and evil. Right? There's this entrenched understanding of women being evil, being bad. And so we have this silencing, this great mass silencing of women beginning in the burning times. So the burning times, we have literal persecution. You say something out of line, you can quite literally be burned at the stake or cast out of your community, which is almost as bad, right? Humans are communal animals. To be cast out or kicked out of your family, of your community, that is in some ways worse than a death sentence. We have the silencing continuing and carrying on. We have, medical misogyny is a really good example of how this silencing continues, right? Women who are emotional are dubbed as hysterical. Fun fact, the term hysteria means wandering uterus. They actually thought that the uterus wandered around in the body and caused emotional reactivity or something. Like that was the cause of women being emotional. And so our bodies were pathologized. We have all of the hand-me-downs of this time still living in our society, right? This dismissal, you're being emotional, right? How many times have you been dismissed? Have your thoughts or ideas or your needs or your criticisms or your rage been dismissed because you're being too emotional? You're overreacting. You just need to calm down, right? We live in a society that prioritizes calm, clear, rational, mental over emotional, intuitive, embodied, right? And this is Descartes. We're going to get to him. We have this really entrenched cultural conditioning that tells us that our worth is tied to being small, being nice, not making others uncomfortable, being productive and useful, right? And logic over intuition. So of course you second guess yourself. Of course you hold back. You've been taught to. And that teaching was a systematic silencing and suppression of your innate wisdom and power. And you're here because somewhere inside you, you know that to be true. When I talk about the word witch, and I've shared already, you never need to embrace this word in order to understand how the witch wound is impacting you, in order to do the healing work there. Not everybody is here to be a witch. And when I came across Carmen Spagnola's definition of what a witch was in her book, The Spirited Kitchen, I knew, I could feel again in my bones that, yeah, this is me. This is where I'm landing. This is what I'm living into. I had already claimed the title. I was describing it or defining it as, a healer, a knowledge keeper, a midwife, a community center, a wise woman, connected to plants. All of those things come into it for me. But Carmen's definition, which I'm going to read for you now, just really hits the nail on the head. So, if resisting oppression, reclaiming my body as my own, praying to my ancestor tree, fighting for collective liberation, and organizing around a culture of care and dignity for all makes me a witch, my friend, I am that. So, now we know the history, now we know where it comes from, right? We've got a bit of the basics. Where did this wound start? Bunch of white dudes burning women for having opinions. How does it show up? So the witch wound, again, it's not just historical. It's alive in your body, in my body, right now. So we're going to look at the ways that it shows up, some of which are really obvious, some of which are more subtle. The first and kind of maybe the most present way, or one of the most present or prominent ways, is in self-silencing and holding back from using our voices, right? We were literally, for years, for centuries, burned alive for speaking up, for using our voice, for speaking out against the powers that be, or for sharing our wisdom and medicine. And while we are not literally burned at the stake anymore today, there is still very much a real fear of being chewed up and spat out and ridiculed and hate-mongered at in the comment sections on our socials, right? We're so connected, and the vitriol that gets spewed in online spaces, especially towards women who are not fitting the mold that society has told us to be, which is prepubescent and yet also sexually available and never aging and quiet, all of those things, we can feel like we're being burned alive. If we speak up, if we speak out, if we balk or buck those roles that have been prescribed for us, right? While we are not literally kicked out of the village anymore, we still can be cast out of friend groups, social situations, right? Cancel culture is real and alive. And so it makes perfect sense that we hold back in meetings or in social settings, even when you have an answer for something. It shows up as over-explaining. I am guilty of this one. I like everyone to know all of the intimate details of my thought process. And it wasn't until I was preparing for this workshop that I was like, oh yeah, that's one of the ways, right? Over-explaining or softening your opinions, right? I'm not sure, but even when you're sure. This might be wrong, but even when you know it's right. Or how many of you use the word just anytime you're writing an email or popping into a text? Oh, I'm just popping in to follow up, or just wanted to see how that thing is moving along, or oh, I just wanted to touch base. I hadn't heard from you yet, right? We're softening. We wait to be asked rather than offering our opinions, our knowledge. And so often we're apologizing for taking up space, right? Sorry for the long email. Sorry to bother you. Sorry to be so emotional. It is alive. It is real. Fear of being seen. Okay, so this is number 2. Number 1, silencing, self-silencing, and holding back with your voice. The second big way that the witch wound shows up, and this might actually be the most common way you'll hear it talked about, is that fear of being seen. Hiding your talents or dimming your light, right? So not wanting to be a show-off or to be braggy or to come off as arrogant, right? All of these things that are so frowned upon, especially as women, right? Men get to show up and shine and be stars. Not always. We still, don't love a super arrogant braggart, but they're allowed in a way that women are not, right? The labels that get thrown at us. Taylor Swift's If I Were a Man song encapsulates that quite well, right? The labels that we receive when we show up and share and shine are very different than the ones that men receive. Imposter syndrome lives here in this fear of being seen. And yes, men and women both experience imposter syndrome, but women are far more likely to let that imposter syndrome hold them back. They are way more likely to be overqualified and still feel underqualified. I remember reading a stat, and I don't actually have the actual percentages, but women are far less likely than men to apply for a position if they don't meet every single one of the qualifications listed on the application. So maybe there's 10 qualifications and they meet 9 of them, but they don't meet all 10, so they don't apply. Whereas men might only meet 5 or 6, but they're way more likely to apply. And so then, of course, men get the roles because the women aren't applying, even though they're more qualified than the candidates that they end up interviewing, but they just don't apply. And that's that imposter syndrome at work again, and that being told that you are not as valid or valuable. Your opinions should be kept to yourself. Your knowledge is not to be trusted. And then, of course, full-on fear of visibility. So social media, being photographed, public speaking up in group settings, especially group settings where it's men and women present. And then that staying small to make others comfortable. And I know that, the women who come into my world, most of us are empaths, right? And so there's part of it is that, right? Not wanting to make other people uncomfortable because we pick up so easily on the emotions of others. But that's also a product of hypervigilance, right? Needing to be able to read the room to stay safe. And even if it's not true from this lifetime, early days, a lot of empaths are children who really had to be able to read a room in their family to be able to stay safe, who had some sort of trauma in their upbringing with caregivers. And even for those of us for whom that's not true, there again, that witch wound comes in, right? Staying small to make everybody else comfortable, to keep the peace, keeps us safe, or at least that's what our nervous system is telling us. Another way that the witch wound impacts us in this lifetime is in the disconnection from our body and our intuition. So here we come to Descartes, the man I love to hate. Descartes lived in the beginning of the 17th century, 1596 to 1650. So again, thinking back to those burning times dates, this overlaps, right? He came in right towards the end of the height of the burning times. So he lived in this time. And he was a French philosopher, he was a mathematician, he was a scientist. He's called the father of modern philosophy, and his ideas really shaped the Western world's understanding of ourselves. He is the one who said, "I think, therefore I am." And his Cartesian logic, so you may have heard the term Cartesian logic or just Cartesian before, that's referring to Descartes. He came up with this concept of dualism, right? That mind and matter are separate, that mind and body are separate, that humans and nature are separate. This separatism has caused us to grow up in centuries of human generations second-guessing their gut knowing, overriding body signals and feelings, trusting external authorities over our own inner knowing, and then that chronic exhaustion that comes along with it because we're ignoring what our bodies need, right? How many of you have ever not gone pee when you needed to because you were really busy, or not eaten when you were hungry because you were being productive or getting things done? How many of you have prioritized your mind and your learning over your body and its health and well-being? There's so many ways we disconnect and distrust that gut knowing because we've been told it's not to be trusted. On top of this, it has also created this disease or dis-ease of separability from the natural world. That disconnection from body and intuition is also a disconnection from the body of the earth, and our inseparability from nature became a separability, right? So we forgot that we are not apart from nature. We are nature. We are natural, cyclical, rhythmic beings. And we've been told that we're not, and that those cyclical, rhythmic bodily needs and messages can't be trusted. Another way that the witch wound can show up for you is in people pleasing and boundary setting, right? Saying yes when you mean no, feeling guilty if you do say no, putting everyone's needs before your own, right? And that act, again, because of the way we've been socialized, putting other people's needs ahead of our own, it makes us feel virtuous. It makes us feel worthy. I remember countless times as a midwife where I would be bragging about how little sleep I'd got and how little food I'd gotten, or that I hadn't peed in 18 hours. That truly happened once. And it was bragging rights because I was virtue signaling in a culture that rewarded that, and people would be empathetic and like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you could do that." And I felt pride for so blatantly ignoring my tender body's needs as a human. The fear of disappointing other people driving our behavior, and this one's so strong. Again, it goes deep, that witch wound. You disappoint somebody, they might rat you out to the authorities. They might call you a witch, right? If you stop being useful to them, maybe you're a threat to them, or maybe you're just not anymore playing into the ways in which your relationship structure was, where you're useful and helpful and never needing anything. They could quite literally throw you under the bus. And so that lives in our bodies still, and it lives in our the way that we're socialized in our behaviors, right? Our shitty boundaries create shitty boundaries in other people. Other people's shitty boundaries make it really hard to have good boundaries. And this is all wrapped up in good girl syndrome, right? That feeling that we need to be nice. And there's a very big difference between being nice and being kind. We can be kind. And in fact, we should be kind. Kindness, compassion, those are valuable traits. Those are things we should all be cultivating more of. But being nice, and this is where semantics kind of comes into play. Obviously, you can define things differently, but for me, being nice is like that syrupy sweet. You're being nice even when somebody's being an absolute dick to you. You can be a bit of a doormat, maybe even. And we know that autoimmune issues are more common in women than men. A lot of them, these adult autoimmune onset conditions, typically more prevalent in women. And the kind of defining factor is always that, like, she's the nicest person. I can't believe this happened to her. That niceness can quite literally kill us. But it's our nervous system saying, no, this is keeping you safe. This is keeping you safe, right? To be helpful, not make waves, all of that stuff that goes along with being a good girl or a good woman in this society. Okay, just a couple more of the ways that the witch wound shows up and impacts you. So it shows up in our relationships with other women. And the witch wound can sometimes be characterized as a trifecta of wounds. There's the mother wound, there's the sister wound, and there's the witch wound. And I'm not going to go into the mother wound today, but the sister wound is a really intimate part of the witch wound, because one of the most effective tactics of the Inquisition, of the burning times of the Church and the Holy Roman Empire trying to control by sowing fear, was that they pitted women against each other. They pitted neighbors against neighbors. And they created this culture that has then been passed down to us, where we are told, again, from a young age, that other women are not to be trusted. This culture of competition instead of collaboration, of judging other women really harshly. And that's that internalized patriarchy, right? Who does she think she is? Anytime that you notice yourself throwing a judgment on a woman, look what she's wearing. Oh my gosh, how could she? Why is she being so loud? Whatever it is, bossy, bitchy, all of these terms that often it's men putting them on women, but then women put them on other women too. And again, it's that internalized patriarchy and signaling that we're not like those women, right? We'll be a good girl, we'll stay in our place. Even if that's not who we are consciously, there's a lot of that going on under the surface often. A fear of female power, including our own. And so I think that often when those judgments come up, maybe you're, at a work gathering and a woman walks in the room. She's not a friend, she's not a sister, maybe she's a colleague, maybe she's someone you don't know. And she walks in with presence, and she's magnetic, and she's loud and chatty, and she's vibrant. And often our bodies will respond by contracting. And we'll throw that judgment or cast that, who does she think she is, kind of shade. And what that really is fear. And sometimes a little bit of envy, fear for how people might respond to her, fear for her, even if we don't recognize that. And a wish that we could be that way too, but a fear that if we were, again, we'd be too visible, we'd be a target. And then along with this, comes that difficulty trusting other women or being in community. And again, this is not only, none of these things are just from this ancient trauma, because they still get reactivated and played out again and again, because our culture itself carries the trauma, reenacts the trauma. We're still reliving it in a different way, obviously, but it's still present in the way society is structured. And so a lot of women have good reason to mistrust other women, have had a really hard time being in community with other women, because we haven't been raised to know how and to trust one another. And so there are real betrayals that have happened. And so that difficulty trusting other women or being in community, I think, is one of the most devastating pieces of this wound, because there is so much healing that can come through sisterhood, through community with women. And it's part of why my programs are always live. And the community aspect is such a big piece of it. It's the reason I stopped offering only one-on-one. I still do one-on-one coaching and healing work with women, but I started offering more settings where there was community, because I was really recognizing the need for that as we continue to shake off the patriarchy. Our last way that I want to talk about where the witch wound is showing up, or maybe showing up for you, is in our relationship with power. So that fear of claiming your authority. So again, this is that diminishing, the softening, I'm not sure, but instead of, I know my shit and I'm an expert, right? Downplaying your expertise. Again, because we've been told that it's not polite to brag. But there's a difference between bragging and owning your authority, right? Giving our power away to others, our partners. Codependency comes up, and I am recognizing for myself, like alarmingly, how deep that is. I never thought, I've read a lot about codependency, and I was always like, no, that's not me. I don't need to worry about that. And then recently, I'm starting to recognize where it is really alive for me and how deep it runs. And it's really confronting. It's empowering to know it's there. It's still terrifying to do the work to excavate it, but we give our power away often to our partners, to our bosses, to the system. There's that savior seeking. Again, we were raised with Disney. The knight in shining armor always comes along and saves the princess. Modern Disney is starting to flip that script a bit, but like the Disney that we were raised on, it wasn't there yet. We have this hero complex, and we don't want to rock the boat. And then there's that relationship again, relationship with power, belief that wanting more is selfish or greedy, right? Oh, I don't really need more. And so we have the egotistic billionaire maniacs consuming all of the resources, devastating our planet and our societies. And we have these heart-centered, incredibly talented women going, oh, but I wouldn't want to be seen as greedy or selfish by going after more. When we know that women with money, again, there's always outliers, but women who've done some healing work, who are heart-centered and heart-led, women with money do good things with their money. It goes back into the community. It's not hoarded in the same way. So if you feel selfish or greedy for wanting more, give yourself a cause to want more for. Okay, we're not supposed to be at the part where you get to heal yet, but here we are. I'm just going to do a quick time check. Yeah, we're at the 45-minute mark. I'm going to briefly chat about AI and the witch wound and it silencing us. And then we're going to get into the portion of today where we're going to talk about what we can actually do to start on the healing path. I want to say too, if you're watching this as a replay, if you're listening to this as the podcast, please hit me up with any questions you have. If you're watching on YouTube, you can drop questions right in the comments. You do have to be signed in to comment. If you're listening on Spotify, you can leave me a comment on there. You can also just find me over at I am Eileen March on Instagram. You can send me an email, eileen@myluminouslife. I would love to hear what's landing for you here. I would love to hear what's resonating, what you're taking away, any aha moments, any stories you feel to share. I'm here for all of it. Now, briefly, AI and silencing. So we started this off, all the ways that the witch wound shows up. We've got the self-silencing and voice. We've got the fear of being seen. We've got disconnection from our bodies and our intuition. We've got people-pleasing and boundaries, our relationships with other women, and our relationship with power. In terms of the self-silencing and our voices, I just want to present what I recently came to be aware of in terms of AI and how it is a modern silencing of our voices. I did a whole podcast episode about this recently on the Woo Curious podcast, so you can go back and listen to that full episode if you want to go deeper into this conversation. It was my most engaging, as in the most people reached out to talk to me about it after listening, of all my podcast episodes ever. So highly recommend you go check it out. But Cole's notes, bullet points, our voices are a huge source of power, right? They are one of our power sources. And historically, again, silencing women's voices has been a primary tool of control. AI, in so many ways, especially this iteration of AI that is built in the image of the extractive, exploitative, capitalist, onward, upward, linear progress model fallacy that we're living in, it is simply the newest iteration of silencing, right? So many of us are turning to AI to create content, if we're in business especially, to write our emails, to think for us, to create for us. And even if we've trained it, quote unquote, on our voices, it flattens, it homogenizes, it sanitizes. I'm not throwing any shade here because I use it and was using it more than I am now moving forward. Now I'm using it more structurally and searching for ways to engage with it ethically from a values-based place. But I was using it to write for me for a little while, and what I started to notice was that even though it really had captured some of my voice and my essence, the patterns in which it writes started just being glaringly obvious to me everywhere. Suddenly email lists that I had loved being on and reading, I couldn't read anymore. I even noticed it coming up on Substack, everywhere on Instagram and social media. And what I noticed was that my own writing started to sound like AI's writing. Because of course that's what I'm consuming, right? And that's how we, as creatives, and we're all creative beings, all humans are creative, all beings are creative. Part of our creative process is we absorb and we get inspired by what we're seeing and we're reading and hearing and listening to around us. And so it only makes sense that our own creativity is being flattened by AI. So just that little pin in it, right? The witch wound and silencing women are so interconnected, and we are being told implicitly now by AI that our voice isn't good enough, right? AI can say it better. Your thinking isn't clear enough. AI can organize it. Your creativity isn't efficient enough. Outsource it. Again, it's this outsourcing of our power, giving our power away. And we know that it is having direct impact on our brains. Our critical thinking parts of our brains are actually shrinking. They've been doing studies, which is terrifying. We're losing some of that mystery and the wonder and the presence, and our unique voices are disappearing. So, again, I'm not saying AI is evil. I do use it. I plan to continue to use it. But I'm consciously asking as I continue to use it, what are we giving away? And can I be more intentional? Can we be more intentional in how and when we use it? Okay, so let's now move on to the path to healing. We've talked about what the witch wound is, all of the ways that it might be showing up for you in your life, holding you back, keeping you small. Some of these ways are really big and obvious, and some of them are really insidious. So what can we do about it? If the witch wound is this deep and this pervasive, how do we begin to heal it? And as I mentioned at the beginning, this isn't a one and done kind of thing. This is lifelong work. This is a peeling back of layers and a gentle and compassionate excavation of what exists beneath the surface. It is deeply and profoundly possible, and it starts with small and grounded steps. Always. We always want to start small, gently, tenderly, especially when we're dealing with nervous system deep, epigenetic deep, bone deep patterns, beliefs, behaviors, the things that kept us safe for centuries. So the first piece of the healing is already begun, because it's bringing awareness and recognition to the patterns that exist, to the wound where it shows up for you. And we've begun this today as we've gone through the history and the ways in which it can present itself, the ways in which it can hold you back. Naming the wound takes away a little bit of its power, right? we look at it, we see it clearly, we confront it, we name it. That helps. That's a small step. And we start to notice, we start to become aware of where in our own lives we are still acting out from that place of wounding, right? Where are you shrinking? Where are you silencing yourself? For me, as I mentioned, this came up in the idea of, or struggling with codependency recently, where we were talking about planning a vacation. And I have my schedule set up for all of 2026, where at the last week of every month, I have blocked my calendar so that there are no client calls. I'm still working on and in my business, but I'm not taking calls or meetings or recording podcasts or anything like that. So I have this really beautiful chunk of time where I do get to tend to myself a little bit more, and I have uninterrupted time to work. And so those weeks make a lot of sense if we're going to plan a vacation for the vacation to be during those days, those weeks where I don't have to worry about an internet connection and getting somewhere where I can be on the internet for a specific time of day or being in a different time zone. And yet we were starting to plan this vacation, and my partner's contract was up on March 7th. And so he was talking about, let's go somewhere on the 7th. And for me, that really didn't work. And it was like 2 weeks of discussing it until I was like, wait a minute, I'm allowed. This sounds so ridiculous from the outside, but I'm sharing it because of how blind we can be to our own wounding and the patterns. It took me ages to be like, I'm allowed to just say, hey, it actually makes a lot more sense if we go on this week. Would that work for you? And he's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that was it. This fear, this shutting down, this silencing, this not sharing what I was thinking or desiring, this is a product of that wound, right? It's still there. Where do you override your body? That's another place that we start to notice. Where do you override that quiet nudge of intuition because, it's not rational, or what people ask or think, if I did that, it doesn't make any logical sense. Or you override your body's cues for hunger or to go to the bathroom. And so the healing, when we notice, the healing can be as simple as like actually going pee when you need to, or eating healthy food when you feel hungry, or taking a 10-minute nap when you feel depleted. And when we bring this recognition, this awareness, it's so important that we do so with compassionate curiosity, not judgment, right? If I became aware of this pattern that I have and immediately turned around and was like, oh my God, I can't believe that you're doing that. Like, it's so disempowered. If I started beating myself up about it, that's not helpful. We have to be so tender with ourselves as we begin to uncover the ways in which this wound is impacting our lives. We know, again, back to neuroscience, punishment is not a behavior changer. Positive reinforcement is. And that goes for changing our own beliefs, our stories, our patterns. Another way that we can begin to heal this wound is to reclaim our voices. And so again, as with everything, if you're terrified of public speaking, like, don't go jump up on a stage in front of 100 people, right? We want to start small. We always want to start small. Make it feel as safe as possible for your nervous system. It's not going to feel fully safe because it's new, it's unknown, and it's something that has been perceived as fearful for your whole life, for generations. And you also don't want to make it so big and scary that either you set yourself into like an anxiety spiral or it just never happens. And so starting small, speak your truth in low stakes situations, practice with a dear and trusted friend or partner, right? And often this goes for many things that we're trying to change or start to communicate about, whether you're deciding to put boundaries in place or you're going to start speaking your truth or asking for what you need. If you name what you are doing, what you're practicing, what you're wanting to start integrating into your life, if you name it to the people that you're practicing with, it can be so helpful. My partner calls me out when he's like, I feel like you're not saying what you actually think or want or need. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. And so especially if you're changing a behavior, it can make it so much more comfortable if you say like, hey, I'm going to start speaking up a little bit more. And it feels really kind of scary. And, I'm not sure about how it's going to go, but I want to practice with you because you're a safe place. And so even just voicing it, naming that can be so powerful. Can you practice not apologizing for existing, for emoting, for taking up space? This one can be so hard, but next time you feel the desire to apologize because, I don't know, you got emotional, can you catch yourself in that moment and pause? Or maybe you say, oh, I'm sorry, and then you catch it and you go, actually, no, I'm not sorry. And again, practicing with safe people in safe places. Can you write in your own voice? If you do writing for any reason, if it's just emails, if it's making content on social media, if it's whatever it might be, can you practice using your own voice, even if it's messy, even if it's imperfect? Can you say the thing you're afraid to say? This feels the same as, that speaking your truth. Can you say that thing? Can you find a place where it's safe to say it, or safer to say it? And can you let your voice be heard? And so this is a powerful one. If you're practicing, maybe you practice in the safety of your car. Maybe you practice by speaking to your houseplants. Maybe you practice by speaking to your reflection in the mirror. But singing, humming, speaking affirmations, reading poetry, going on a rant, telling yourself how much you love yourself, anything. If we can practice these things out loud, we're using the power of our voices. We're practicing getting comfortable with the words and the sounds coming out of our mouths. And it gets easier in places where other people might hear us. The next one, or the next two, they're all important. I was going to say the next one is maybe the most important, but they're all so important. But reconnecting with your body. Your body holds so much wisdom, and the patriarchy has tried and potentially succeeded in disconnecting you from it, right? It did a great job. Again, fuck Descartes. He did a great job of making us believe that our minds are more important and more trustworthy and more valuable and more valid than our bodies. And so this piece, reconnecting with your body, this might be something that comes quite easily to you. You might already be on a path. Maybe you're a somatic practitioner and connecting with your bodies feels like second nature. And maybe you've spent the last 2 decades of your life nurturing your mind and forgetting you even had a body almost. And so this can feel like really unfamiliar territory. It can feel really overwhelming. It can feel scary. But can you practice tuning in and listening? Just noticing hunger cues, noticing when you have to go to the bathroom, asking your body what it needs right now. And maybe the noticing is simply like, oh, what do my clothes feel like on my skin, right? These small, subtle ways to connect in with that body. She is so wise. She is always sharing information with us. And we are often tuning it out, not listening. I have a really powerful story in my own history of how my body was trying to get my attention and I was ignoring her. This is going back to that marriage that I mentioned where I wasn't allowed to speak my mind, my desires. It was a controlling marriage for sure. I didn't recognize it when I was there. I thought it was pretty decent. It was okay. I don't know. I wasn't very happy, but do I deserve to be happy? Anyways, lots of stories going on. What happened was I started to get heartburn. And my mom was like, I only get heartburn when I'm stressed. And I was like, I'm not stressed. I'm just unhappily married and in a really high stakes job. And eventually, the heartburn started coming more and more frequently. And it got to the point where I was medicated for it. It was coming multiple times a week, middle of the night, would wake me up out of a dead sleep, incredible, intense pain for hours. And I ended up on a prescription medication. And I was so disconnected from my body, from her wisdom, from her needs, that I didn't recognize that I genuinely didn't believe it could be caused by the stress that was happening in my marriage and or my job. And I left my partner eventually, not because of the heartburn. And I ran out of my heartburn medication a few days after I left him. And I can count on one hand the number of times I've had heartburn since, and it's been easily managed. And I'm always a huge flag for me now. I'm like, what's going on? Stop everything. What is stressing me out? Is it my relationship? Is it my work situation? Is it like, am I not taking care of my body? But right, practicing listening, and our body will keep trying. She's never going to give up, but she will get louder. And so if you can listen and reconnect before she gets really loud, you're gaining so much power in your life. So how do you listen? Well, grounding, connecting with the body of the earth to help you connect with your body is a beautiful way to do it. I practice this during the I look outside, it's snowing, during the not wintry months by going outside every day and putting my feet on the earth. So if you can do that, amazing, even for a couple of minutes. If you can't, hands on a tree, ask the tree's permission first. And again, I say this, and as I was prepping to record, I was like, but what if you're so out of touch with your body that you can't feel that tree's consent in your body? And so to that, I say this: if you are approaching a tree with genuine love, with this desire to connect to yourself, to the tree, and you're simply wishing to place your hands on the tree's bark to find some of that connection, take the pause, ask with your heart. It's okay if you can't feel the answer yet, because I don't know a tree out there that wouldn't be genuinely delighted to have you lay your hands on their trunk with love and compassion to connect to yourself. Another way to reconnect with your body, if you are in a menstruating body, is to follow your cycle. Pay attention to how you feel, hunger cues, pain, fatigue, brain fog, energy levels, all of those things through your monthly cycles. If you're not in a menstruating body, then following the lunar cycle and seeing how you feel at different times of the lunar 28-day cycle can be really a cool way to tune in and check and see how your rhythm aligns with the rhythms of the earth. And then, of course, seasonal as well. And this, I could go on and on and on about cycles. I have a full masterclass on that topic alone. It's an entire module inside of Unleash Your Inner Witch, my signature 12-week program that we'll be talking about a little bit more at the end of today. It's a really powerful practice, aligning with cycles: menstrual, lunar, seasonal. And then rest. We, again, live in this society that tells us that to be worthy, to be valuable, to be lovable, we need to be productive, we need to be of service, we need to be useful to others and doing, achieving. In this world, rest is resistance. And rest, taking the time to slow down long enough without distractions, without scrolling, without Netflix, without something to keep ourselves busy, is a beautiful way to start to hear what your body is saying. And as I was preparing to deliver this today, I realized as I got to this point and was thinking about what I wanted to say, I was like, oh, of course. So as I said, we're going to be talking more about Unleash Your Inner Witch towards the end of today. And I just want to share now, because it's exciting when it dropped in, that as a bonus, if you're signing up to join me in this next round of Unleash Your Inner Witch in its new and improved, longer, more integrative format, it's going from a 6-week course to a 12-week course with some integration, a little more time for connection. I'm also going to add in the bonus of the invitation to come into the monthly rest circles inside of the Wise Wild Woman mentorship for the duration. So that means you get 3 rest circles during Unleash. And one of the Wise Wild Women said that after the very first one that we had together last year, back in February, a year ago, really, that it was the most rested she's ever felt. It's a really beautiful, magical practice. Anyways, rest, whether it be 5 minutes laying down on the couch with your eyes closed, whether it be a meditative slow walk, whether it be meditation, but rest, stillness is so important. Remembering your interconnectedness, and I alluded to this with grounding, with honoring your cycles. Again, our bodies are nature. And so that's part of the remembering of the interconnectedness between us as humans, but also between ourselves and the more than human world. You are not separate from nature, as much as Descartes wishes that it were true. You are nature, right? We often call human creations and impacts unnatural, but they're not, because we are nature. And so anything we do and create and produce, it's natural. It's not necessarily positive or good or in harmony. And in fact, that's a big part of why we're causing harm, because of this suffering of the disease or the dis-ease of separability. Again, that idea that we are separate from nature. The lie that we've been raised within, that humans are apart from nature and from the more than human world. That's what causes the harm, or allows us to cause the harm, and view nature as a resource to be exploited, right? The same intelligence that grows trees and turns the season lives in you. So one of the most powerful ways to begin, and gentle and easy, really, and tender ways to begin healing that witch wound, is to spend time in relationship with the land. Noticing the rhythms around you and within you. Part of the work that I do has been, and my own practice, the most powerful piece was connecting to the cycles of nature and celebrating and marking those moments. And so the Wheel of the Year ceremonies that I hold, which are open to everyone, they're of course also included in Unleash Your Inner Witch. There's 2 that happen during our time together, and both are included. That rhythmic connection is so powerful. You belong here on this earth, integrated with the rest of the more than human world. And remembering that is the biggest fuck you to extractive, exploitative, capitalistic patriarchy. How many of these words can I use all in one row? That we can possibly have, right? Another way that we heal is through sisterhood and community. And so if you're attending this masterclass live, then you're in community. If you're watching the replay, you are still in community, right? You're choosing to come to a space where many people are engaging in the same learning and uncovering and growth and healing together. We can't heal this wound alone. We can't heal anything alone. We are not solitary creatures. As much as we've been fed the lie that hyper-independence is a good thing, it is not. And it is unnatural. If anything is unnatural, that is unnatural. This wound is a collective wound. And so finding your people, the women who are also doing the work, coming to Unleash Your Inner Witch with me. Maybe you step into Wise Wild Woman mentorship. Maybe you find a sister circle, a women's circle, a moon circle, a group of girlfriends who are all exploring this together, right? There's so many places, and there's more and more available. But finding community and sisterhood, celebrating other women instead of competing with them, right? When we see someone achieving, a woman achieving, celebrating her, lifting her up instead of pulling her down. Practicing witnessing and being witnessed. Sharing your gifts, receiving the gifts of others. And this is a huge piece, this community, this sisterhood piece. It's a huge part of why I continue to offer Unleash as a live cohort, because all the online business guru wisdom that be is like, you turn this into an evergreen course and then you don't have to teach it. And to me, I might someday create it evergreen so that people can drop in when they want, but I don't think that I'll ever stop offering it live, because that is the magic of it. Being in the room together, connecting, communicating, asking questions in real time, sharing the magic as it unfolds, witnessing, being witnessed. It's all so important, and you lose all of that if you're not live. So that's why it is a live experience, because we are in need of more safe community spaces for women. The last piece that I'm going to offer here as a tool for healing the witch wound is to integrate ritual and ceremony into your life. Ritual used to be a far more prevalent part of our experience as women, as humans. We are living in a culture bereft of ritual these days. And ritual is so potent and powerful, not only in creating meaning and delineating time in our lives, but also in anchoring us into our desires and our power and helping us clear some of those wounds. So creating small, simple rituals that ground you in your power. And again, starting simple, a morning intention or an evening gratitude or some sort of seasonal acknowledgement, right? Maybe it's just lighting a candle on each of those turns of the wheel and sitting in silent contemplation of the energies for a little bit. Maybe you build an altar, smoke cleansing, tea ceremony prayer. There's so many ways to do this. Again, we do a whole module in Unleash Your Inner Witch about crafting ritual and prayer and altar building. Ritual renders time habitable. It slows us down. It creates meaning and gives the space and the structure as well for healing to happen. Because without structure, jumping off the deep end of a healing journey can feel really scary, right? It can feel uncontained. It can feel like we can get lost in it. And so ritual creates the banks of the river, if you will. It creates a structure within which it becomes more potent, but also safer feeling to go into some of those healing places. And that's why it's where we start in Unleash. So I'm going to drop us into a guided visualization. This is a really powerful healing activation. So this is one of the tools that you will be leaving with today, right? You can return to this anytime you wish. It's recorded on Insight Timer. I'll be making sure to leave the link for you to listen and come back to it as many times as you need to share with any sisters that feel like might benefit from it. But a reminder before we drop in that visualization practices can be really potent and powerful, and they can also be a struggle. So depending on how you're feeling in this moment, if you're listening to this on replay and you're driving, obviously you're not about to drop into a visualization. You might listen to it kind of with one ear, or you might wait and come back to this point. But being with yourself and knowing it's okay for emotion to come up, and it's also okay if you're really distracted. You can come back to it. There's no way to do it wrong. You don't have to get this right. Being in a setting where you're not going to be disturbed, being in a position that feels comfortable to your body, all of this can help you experience a more deep practice. And so I'm going to invite you to find yourself in a comfortable place. And so that might be for you lying down, or it might just be sitting. Gently closing your eyes, or taking a soft gaze downwards. Remembering there's no right or wrong way to experience this. You might see images, you might feel sensations, you might only hear the words, you might just rest. Your mind might go in a million different directions and come back every now and then to my voice. All of that is perfect. If you're dropping back into this healing visualization after this class, there is music accompanying the version that is on Insight Timer. I'm going to keep it silent here today, but that offer is there to return with the music if it feels better. So, getting yourself comfy, and when you feel ready, closing your eyes or taking that soft gaze downwards. If you're sitting, ground down into your sit bones. If you're laying, allowing the entire back surface of your body to become heavy. Begin to connect to your body by following the breath in through your nose as it fills your lungs and softens your belly outwards. Feeling your breath nourish each cell of your physical being and allowing your muscles and ligaments to soften as the breath leaves your body. Really let the full weight of your body be supported by the chair or the surface beneath you, by the floor beneath that, by the earth beneath the building you are in. Feeling deeply connected and supported in this way. Feeling deeply connected and supported in this way. Begin to visualize the generations of women who came before you. You may see them standing ahead of you, to one or both sides, perhaps in a line behind you. Hundreds of women who came before. Bring to mind your mother, your grandmother, her mother, her grandmother, as far back as you wish to go. Remember on a cellular level that you were in your grandmother's body. You are a part of her. Just as any children you might bear are a part of you, and any children that daughters of yours might have are a part of your body as well. As you imagine the generations of women who came before you, turn to face them. Perhaps you see faces, perhaps only silhouettes. Perhaps they appear to you as shining lights. However they appear, take a deep breath now and feel their power, their courage, their knowledge, their love and support. Do they have any messages for you? And take a moment here and connect with that powerful, divine, feminine energy of your lineage, listening for a message which may take the form of words or images, color or sound, shape or emotion. Simply be here and receive whatever it is your ancestors wish to share with you now. As they share their message with you, imagine all the fragments of your voice, of your power, scattered through time and space, all along your lineage. Imagine them being called back into your body now. Feeling them land along with the wisdom your ancestors are imparting to you. Feeling your voice and your power residing whole within you. Reclaimed. And with that voice, with that power, make these women, the women of your lineage, your ancestors, make them a promise. A promise that you will do what you can in this lifetime to heal the witch wound within, so that your granddaughters, whether physical or spiritual, will not fear to shine, so that the women who come after you, whether they be of your blood or not, may step up and claim their own power too. You may be able to do much or only a little in this lifetime. Both are equally good. Once you have made your promise, and before you come back to your body, share any last words or wishes with these women. Exchange and embrace with them if you wish. Acknowledge these powerful women who came before you. And now, slowly and gently, reconnect with your breath. Allowing the breath to bring you back into an awareness of your body, the sensations of your clothing on your skin, the points where your body makes contact with the surface beneath you. And moving out from that awareness of the body to an awareness of the room that you are in, any sounds or scents. And slowly and gently, when you feel ready, open your eyes. If you'd like to take a few moments here to write down any messages that came through from your ancestors, to journal a little bit about who was present and what you are carrying forward from here, please feel free to do so. If you're listening to this as a recording or watching it, go ahead and pause and take some time to do that now. Thinking about what came up for you during that journey. If you feel called to share, I would love to hear from you. And also recognizing that this is a very powerful and sometimes very private practice. If you felt emotion arise, tears, resistance, peace, passion, or nothing at all of that is normal. And just walking forward from this space with an understanding or an awareness that the healing you may have received in this visualization, it continues after today. Powerful energetic work and practices like this, they continue to unfold and ripple out and deepen for hours and often days, even weeks after we experience them. This is part of why when I offer energy healing work to my clients, we typically never drop in more than once every 2 weeks because it takes time. The actual practice, the energetic movement or healing or journey is fast. But the waves and the ripples and the actual healing is slow. And a reminder too, as we move forward from here, that what we've touched on today is just a beginning. There's a lot of information. There was a lot to take in and to sit with, and so you might want to return to this recording. You might want to take more notes. You might want to pause more frequently and get things down. You might want to journal on what arose for you as you listened. Because the witch wound runs deep, and healing it is ongoing, relational work. And as I mentioned before, it requires community. Because a big piece of the wound is wounding around community. It requires practice, and it requires a sustained attention. So for those of you who felt something stirring today, who are ready to go deeper, who want community and support, I'm going to transition now to talking to you a little bit more about Unleash Your Inner Witch, my 12-week program, which is designed specifically for this work. If you know that this is not the space for you now, I invite you just to sit and be present with us and witness what is here for others, perhaps. I often describe Unleash as a course in moving differently through the world. The subtext on the website says a beginner's course in witchcraft for the woo curious, which it is. We cover some kind of basics of what might be considered to be witchcraft, but it's so much more than that. It's a different way of relating to and moving in the world. As I mentioned, it's a 12-week program with live community calls, and there are integration weeks interspersed in there because I have found from experience, I used to run it again as a 6-week course, and there wasn't enough time for connection and conversation, and there wasn't enough time for integration and putting the tools and the learnings into practice. And so I've extended the course, created more integration time, created more space for connection. It's an intimate group. It's a maximum enrollment of 16 people because it needs to stay connected and held. And any more than that would make it very difficult to keep the sanctity of the container and create enough space for that connection and communication and community. We deep dive through the 12 weeks into ritual and ceremony. How to weave magic into your daily life without feeling like you're adding to your to-do list, because that is a real concern. We look into ancestor work. We meet and heal within your lineage. We connect with guides, both spirit, plant, and animal. We dive into plant medicines, smoke cleansing, grounding practices, tarot, oracle, pendulum crystals. There's so much richness in this course. And then, of course, woven throughout and then really focused on towards the end is this piece of cyclical living. So the wheel of the year, the lunar cycles, your menstrual cycles, your body's rhythms. Part of the course is a private WhatsApp community for ongoing connection and practice between calls. And I found that this is such a rich space for deepening the practice. It's a really important piece of the integration. And it's so helpful, again, when we are working on any kind of healing or growth. It's so helpful when there's many of us to remember. You can have all the best intentions, be like, I'm going to start doing a morning ritual, and you might do it 1 or 2 mornings, and then there's a morning that gets busy and you forget and you fall off the wagon and you're like, oh well, I guess that didn't work for me. But when we have community and people dropping in to share what they're doing, it's like that gentle invitation back over and over. As I mentioned, you'll be invited to join the Wheel of the Year ceremonies that fall during the course. So that will be the spring equinox, and then Beltane, the beginning of summer. You will be invited into the rest circles, and that's brand new. I've never offered that to folks inside of Unleash Your Inner Witch before. It feels really tender to do so, and so potent and powerful, because rest is such a foundation of the work I do. Cyclical living, yes, but with this emphasis on the restful pieces, because that's what our society has forgotten. And that pushing us to exhaustion constantly, again, extraction, exploitation, witch wound, all over that. It keeps us from living into our power, stepping into our power, making the change we want. So rest. My email sign off, if you've been on my list for any amount of time, you've probably noticed my email sign off is rested women will change the world. So that feels really important to me to offer. You'll have a lifetime access to all the call recordings. So of course, if you can't attend any of the calls live or some of the calls live, you'll get the recording and you'll have access to that to revisit. And this sisterhood of women walking this path together. I have several women who've joined me inside of Unleash on multiple occasions, and they continue to come back because they continue to get more and more out of this place. So it is a lived experiential practice. It invites you deeper. I've had women who have no knowledge of the woo, as it were, spirituality, witchcraft, who would never identify as a witch, who've come into the space. I've had women who are deep into their own journey, who keep returning, even though the basics are known, but there's something here, there's magic here for us. And the transformation that this space offers is this deeper connection and trust in your intuition, that confidence in your own inner knowing, a slower way of moving through the world, even though I'm not going to be like, helping you, what was productivity? It's not a productivity hack. There's a way to move more slowly, even without taking anything off your plate necessarily, though you may find things that can be taken off. You'll walk away with this life that's enriched with everyday magic, a community that sees and celebrates you, and a homecoming to yourself. This is, as I mentioned, a 12-week program, and it is $11.97 to join us inside. That is the pay in full price. The payment plan price is non-penalizing, so if you need to drop in on a payment plan, you're not paying any more than anyone who's paying in full. And if you need an extended payment plan, those are available. Just reach out to me. All of the information and the details are over on the website, myluminouslife.ca/unleash your inner witch. There's dashes between all those. And of course, they'll be linked in the replay email below the podcast show notes if you're happening to listen to this on the podcast. This work isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the masks and the conditioning and the fear and the silencing. So if you're ready for that remembering, I'd be so honored to walk beside you. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be more than happy to hop onto a quick call, either Zoom or like good old-fashioned phone call, or we can voice note back and forth. And if this space isn't for you now, that's 100% okay too. I really genuinely hope, I believe, I trust that you received something valuable from this time together today. I know that when I created it, I poured so much in the hopes that it would create some deep healing and transformation for you and set you on that path. Whether or not you ever choose to go deeper with me, I hope that you find a sisterhood. I want to thank you once again for being here, for making the decision to show up, to take this time for you to do the deep work, to honor yourself. One last breath and moment here, hand on heart, smile on your face, connecting with your body, connecting with each of us here. I see you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this work with me. And thank you for doing me the honor of allowing me to be your guide on this journey today.